The estate sale was supposed to be Jessica's treasure hunt, a Saturday morning adventure through someone else's memories. She wasn't looking for anything specific when she spotted the mirror in the bedroom of the Victorian house. But something about its ornate silver frame called to her like a whispered invitation. The mirror stood nearly 6 feet tall, its surface unmarred by age, despite the intricate carvings that suggested it was well over a century old. Roses and thorns intertwined around the frame's edges, with small cherub faces peering out from corners like secret watchers. The asking price was surprisingly low for such an exquisite piece. "Beautiful, isn't it?" The elderly woman running the sale appeared beside Jessica, her voice carrying a note of relief. "It belonged to my Aunt Margaret. She was very particular about her appearances." Jessica nodded, already imagining the mirror in her bedroom. "It's perfect. I'll take it." The woman's expression flickered with something that might have been guilt or concern. "Are you sure, dear? It's quite old, and sometimes old things carry history." But Jessica was already pulling out her checkbook, enchanted by the way the morning light danced across the mirror's surface. She arranged for delivery that afternoon and spent the rest of the day rearranging her bedroom to accommodate her new acquisition. That evening, as Jessica prepared for bed, she stood before the mirror to brush her hair. Her reflection looked back as expected, but something seemed off about the image. The woman in the mirror appeared older, more tired, with lines around her eyes that Jessica didn't remember having. She leaned closer, examining her face, but the harsh overhead light made everything look strange. She dismissed it as late-night paranoia and went to sleep. The next morning brought a disturbing discovery. As Jessica applied her makeup, she noticed the reflection again seemed wrong. This time the woman in the mirror was wearing a different nightgown, one that Jessica had never owned. The fabric was white and flowing, almost like a burial shroud, and there were dark stains across the chest that looked suspiciously like blood. She spun around, checking her actual nightgown. She was wearing her usual blue pajamas, completely unstained. When she looked back at the mirror, her normal reflection had returned. Curious and increasingly uneasy, Jessica began researching the mirror's history. The estate sale woman had mentioned an Aunt Margaret, so Jessica started there. Public records revealed that Margaret Thornfield had indeed owned the Victorian house for 43 years before her death 6 months ago. But the obituary raised more questions than answers. Margaret had died in her sleep, apparently from natural causes, but her funeral was closed casket, and she'd been buried in a white burial gown, the same gown Jessica had seen in the mirror. Digging deeper, Jessica discovered that Margaret had purchased the mirror in 1981 from another estate sale. The previous owner, a woman named Dorothy Hess, had also died mysteriously in her sleep. Before Dorothy, the mirror had belonged to Eleanor Cross, who had passed away under similar circumstances in 1965. The pattern became clear as Jessica traced the mirror's ownership back through decades. Every owner had died unexpectedly, and all had been found wearing white nightgowns regardless of what they normally wore to bed. That night, Jessica tried to ignore the mirror by turning it toward the wall, but her curiosity proved stronger than her fear. Around midnight, she turned it back and gasped at what she saw. The reflection wasn't her bedroom at all. Instead, the mirror showed a different room, one with faded wallpaper and heavy curtains. In the reflection, Jessica watched herself sleeping in a bed she didn't recognize, wearing the white nightgown she'd seen before. But this time, a figure stood at the foot of the bed, watching her sleep. The figure was tall and thin, dressed in old-fashioned clothing, with long fingers that seemed to reach toward the sleeping Jessica in the mirror. As she watched in horror, the figure in the reflection began to move closer to the bed. She spun around to check her actual bedroom, but found herself alone. The mirror was showing her something that hadn't happened yet, but felt inevitable. She tried to research the figure in the mirror, searching through old photographs and records connected to the mirror's history. What she found chilled her to the bone. The same tall figure appeared in family photographs spanning over a century, always in the background, always watching. The figure wasn't human. It was something that fed on the life force of young women using the mirror as a hunting ground. Each owner would see their death in the reflection days before it occurred, giving them time to fear what was coming, but not enough time to escape it. Jessica realized she was trapped in a supernatural contract she'd never agreed to sign. The mirror had chosen her, just as it had chosen all the others. The estate sale, the low price, even her intractable attraction to the piece, all of it had been orchestrated by something that understood human nature well enough to exploit it. But Jessica refused to accept her fate passively. She spent the next day researching protection spells, consecration rituals, and ways to break supernatural bonds. She learned that mirrors could be cleansed with salt and sacred herbs, and that some spirits could be banished if their anchoring object was properly destroyed. That evening, armed with knowledge and desperation, she prepared for battle. She surrounded the mirror with salt circles, burned sage until her apartment filled with smoke, and spoke every protection prayer she could find online. Then she confronted the reflection directly. "I know what you are, and I know what you want, but I'm not like the others. I won't go quietly." The figure in the mirror smiled, revealing teeth that were too sharp and too many. It gestured to the sleeping Jessica in the reflection, then pointed to the real Jessica standing before the mirror. The message was clear. Her death was scheduled for tonight, and no amount of salt or sage would change that. But Jessica had one more trick. She'd discovered that the mirror's power came from its victims' acceptance of their fate. Each owner had watched their death approach with resigned terror. Jessica chose a different response. She picked up a baseball bat and swung it directly at the mirror's surface. The glass shattered into 1,000 pieces, each shard reflecting a different moment of death from the mirror's long history. But as the pieces fell, Jessica heard something else breaking. The sound of chains snapping, of a prison door opening, and souls, finally, being set free. The figure let out a shriek that seemed to come from the broken glass itself, and then everything went silent. Jessica swept up every piece of the mirror and buried them in separate locations around the city, ensuring that the evil could never reassemble itself. She'd learned that some reflections are too dangerous to keep, and that sometimes the only way to change your future is to shatter the window that shows it to you. The white nightgown never appeared in her dreams again.